Hello and welcome to Newswire Afghanistan Special. I am Jawad Tehami. The possible extension in the evacuations deadline has become a contentious point between the Taliban and the Western powers. US President Joe Biden has said the sooner it is completed, the better. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson says the future engagement with the Taliban will depend on the safe passage even after the deadline. Taliban spokesman Zabiullah Mujahid, in his second presser after the Kabul takeover, said that the US is creating frenzy at the Kabul airport and should stop provoking Afghans to flee. Meanwhile, the World Bank has suspended aid disbursements to Afghanistan. $784 million were committed by the bank for the war-ravaged country in 2021. On the other hand, the World Food Programme has warned of a catastrophe on top of a catastrophe as millions of Afghans risk starvation. And to talk more about this, I am today joined by Lieutenant General retired Naeem Khalid Lodhi, defense analyst, and Mr. Zafar Hilaly, former ambassador. I will begin the discussion with you, Mr. Hilaly. Do you think the statements of the US President and British Prime Minister, the two allies, are not on the same page regarding the evacuation process that is ongoing?
I think for all practical purposes, they are on the same page, even if they sound as if they are not. Johnson's threat that the reaction of the West will continue to be measured after the expiry date is an additional threat, warning, foreboding of what may happen. But I think that they are basically on the same track, yes.
Okay, General Lodhi, there was some reservations by the European allies on the US decision on such a hasty withdrawal because they were of the view that without Americans at the Kabul airport, they won't be able to complete their evacuations. Do you think they are on the same page right now regarding this evacuation process?
I'll just say a sentence about the hasty withdrawal. If a decision was taken 2 years before that they will be going out, and then there was an agreement and there was a timeline, I do not know what was the haste, and they were here for 20 years. So I don't think it was a hasty withdrawal. It was a well-organized withdrawal. The only thing is about the Kabul airport. In my opinion, if Americans had concentrated and focused on the evacuation of Americans first, and later on about the Afghans which they wanted to take, this time was enough. But you must have seen that they started, stuffing the planes with Afghans more than the Americans, which meant that they were not very sincere in taking out the Americans first. Otherwise, this much time was enough. And I don't think that there will be any concession from the Afghan Taliban as far as extension of this date is concerned. So it will be a good face saving for Americans and their allies if they try to evacuate at least their own people within this stipulated time. Later on, some other arrangement can be made with the Afghan Taliban, whereby the Afghans, those who want to leave the country, they can continue their evacuation through other aircraft, through other nationalities. So I think that is the only via media. Otherwise, I see the things going towards the standoff, and it will not bode well for Afghanistan or even for American and their allies.
So, General Lodhi, you're of the view that there is hardly any chance of any sort of concession by the Taliban to the Western forces in the extension of this deadline. So, do we see any escalation of tension between the foreign forces which are stationed over there and between the Taliban on the ground?
I think that is a remote possibility. What I sense is that Taliban will give some alternative offer to Americans. For example, they can say that we can have some other country, some neutral country, looking after the airport, and some other planes of some other countries will come and evacuate the remaining people. But they will definitely say that all soldiers, American soldiers, and all those who had fought against Taliban, they must leave by 31st August. So some via media may be there. It is not necessary that they'll have a bloody standoff. It will be a dry standoff as far as I think. And some counter proposals will be given by Taliban very soon. This is what I expect.
Okay, I'll take this point to Mr. Hilaly. Mr. Hilaly, if any sort of extension happens, and earlier we saw the Taliban calling it a red line, do you think they would retaliate by force on the ground after such type of an extension happens to be?
When they talk about retaliation beyond the red line, obviously you must include all sorts of ways that they can retaliate, including force. I mean, they've said that in so many words. Why is there any doubt about that? And I think that is what has made Biden reiterate that he means to keep his word. He will be leaving on the 31st. He just reiterated that.
Okay, Mr. Hilaly, as you just said, there could be any possibility, and if they say of retaliating, it could be by force as well, which General Lodhi doesn't agree to. I'll go to General Lodhi afterwards, but if, according to you, if this retaliation happens by force, will it give any sort of justification to the foreign forces to increase troops deployment over there?
Are you asking me, Hilaly?
Yeah, Mr. Hilaly, go ahead, please.
What I say is that the Americans need very little excuse to bomb. I'm not saying that they will re-invade. I don't think they can handle that because they know the consequences. But I won't be surprised if they bomb, and their bombing can be quite devastating. So they can do anything. They can do anything. I mean, look at the way the whole thing is handled. It's been such a mess. Can you really believe that you can rule anything out with this administration, with the kind of competence with which it has been operating, and it has overseen this evacuation? Is there anything that didn't go wrong, that could have gone wrong? I don't know. I think, look, tell me, it makes sense for the United States to react by bombing. You know why it makes sense to react by bombing? Any provocation anywhere in the world, it reacts by drones, bombings, and now and then with special forces. Why? Because it pays them. In that military-industrial complex, which makes $1 billion a day from wars, if there are no wars, they suffer. So why should they not? They're looking. Let me tell you, they must be wanting, where will they see? They probably want Iran to start again because they make money. Their own president, as long ago as 1951, Dwight Eisenhower, warned the world. So when you are...
Mr. Hilaly, I beg for the interruption. When you talk about the monetary benefits by the U.S. as their industrial complex, the military-industrial complex, as you're of the view, very much depends on this, and over $1 billion are generated per day. Do you think this, these sort of contrary statements coming from the U.S. and then the European allies is a pretext in order to launch some new offensive against the Taliban on the ground if those monetary benefits are concerned?
Well, I think that, let's give Biden credit. He could have stayed on. A lot of the hawks in America wanted him to stay on. They wanted him to forego the date set by Trump, but he didn't. Why didn't he? Because he says, I'm 78 years old. This is my only term. I'm not going to stand for re-election. And I'm not going to go in for this war because it's a bloody war and everything. And you've seen the reaction? Have you seen the reaction of the right wing, of the 11 chief industrial concerns that benefit from war? I mean, can you imagine $800 billion is spent by the U.S., which is more than the total amount spent by every country in the world, including China and Russia. And you want to ask whether they consider this military-industrial complex to be important or relevant to every decision? Every decision on war is taken with a view to this. And that's almost without exaggeration.
General Lodhi, Mr. Hilaly has put forth quite startling figures at this moment that happen to be giving a sort of a monetary benefit to the military industrial structure of the US, particularly. What do you have to say about that?
I'm not an expert on the internal politics of an internal economy of America, so I'll go along with whatever he says. But let us come back to the Afghan situation. There are other manifestations of power which Afghan Taliban can use. It is not necessary that they fire and kill the Americans. They can do so many things. For example, they can render the airstrips and airport unusable through mortar fires or something. They can make sure that no planes can land or take off from those airstrips by let us say bursting their tires or doing something. So because throughout this campaign they have tried their best to avoid bloodshed. So I think they would try to keep that record and not attack these forces directly, but indirectly some manifestation of force is possible. That I also understand. Whereas the Americans, they have been attacking various countries under various pretexts, but you must have noticed that they always make some excuse and make some legal excuse. For example, asking UN Security Council to give them a blanket approval, or asking other allied countries to give be with them and give them that approval sort of thing. So because they are leaving Afghanistan in a very bad shape, so militarily I think it is not possible to come back and attack Afghanistan physically with troops on ground. Yes, of course, what Excellency Hilaly is saying, that they can always resort to air bombing and they are very fond of it. But then it will make a lot of collateral damage, and they'll be further unpopular within Afghanistan and elsewhere. So it's a very difficult situation. But I think they were just trying to assert themselves unnecessarily, because there's a war of perception going on. They want to give this impression to the world that we can stay in Afghanistan as long as we like, and we can come back to Afghanistan whenever we like. Actually, these things are not possible anymore for quite some time.
Okay, so General Lodhi, as per the statement from the British Prime Minister Boris Johnson, he said after the G7 emergency meeting yesterday that the future engagement with the Taliban will depend on the safe passage after the deadline. So does it imply that when it will come to international recognition of a probable Taliban-led setup, that would pose a big challenge for the group to gain international legitimacy?
You see, if they are talking about a safe passage even after the deadline, that is very much possible. I mean, Afghan Taliban can undertake that responsibility, that all the foreign forces must leave by 31st August. But we will make sure that all those who want to go and go outside the country, they will be allowed to do so. So that condition can be met by Taliban, even if there are no foreign forces. But one thing is for sure, that America is against Afghan Taliban regime, and they will do everything. And you have seen that what they have done so far, frozen their assets, and even asked the World Bank to do so. And other countries will also follow the Western countries. But then there are enough countries on the other side, Russia, China, Iran, Central Asian countries, maybe some others also, who would like to see some peace in Afghanistan and would like to support the regime, the future regime in Afghanistan. So it is being contested. It is not an open field for America and their allies that whatever they want to do. So I think something via media will happen, and they will not be able to put pressure just through finances or economic pressures on Afghan Taliban. Afghan Taliban will keep on going the course which they have already selected for themselves.
So, Mr. Hilaly, what do you think of this statement by British Prime Minister Boris Johnson that the engagement with the Taliban will depend on the first and the foremost condition he said was of the safe passage if they allow it even after the deadline? So does it imply that when it comes to international recognition or gaining the international legitimacy, Taliban would be facing a tough time?
Look, I agree with what General Lodhi has said in this manner, that without negotiating now before the deadline, that they will extend the deadline. Obviously, that makes no sense because they want the U.S. troops out and they want normalcy to return to Afghanistan so that they can get on with the business of running the country and bringing it back to some form of normalcy after 40 years of war. Now, the point is this, that yes, certainly, I think that if the Yanks clear off, if the Americans leave, and there are a few people left behind, I think that can be settled peacefully. I think they would willingly hand them over. In fact, I think it will show to the world that the Americans are wrong in thinking that they are mad fanatics who want to kill people, because even though the time limit has passed, they are handing over even American servicemen. So yes, I agree with General Lodhi that at that time, I think that the Taliban will do that. It serves them, serves their purpose. It doesn't serve their purpose to say so now, but it certainly it suits them, and they should actually, by any reckoning, do that in case there are people left over. That problem is a little different. You see, the Americans keep instigating people who are professionals and educated people to leave. Even if the Americans don't instigate, the fact that people can now get onto a plane saying that they are in dread of the Taliban enables a lot of people to leave. Now, I mean, for example, if you came to Pakistan and opened up the green residency rights all over the world, half of this country would clear out because this country isn't doing very well economically and people want jobs. So they don't want that to happen, continue to happen. Every time the Americans want to destabilize or do something, they can say, oh, you know, anybody who are being discriminated against, people who are being, their human rights are being violated, we, America, have always opened. And they've been there long enough to have a lot of contact. So that's what the Taliban mean by saying, go, get out, take the people who are relevant, take the people you've nominated and your citizens, and leave us in peace.
Okay, I'll take this point to General Lodhi, as Mr. Hilaly has said, and Taliban. Do you think the Taliban were right when they say that the Americans are creating frenzy and they should stop provoking the Afghans to flee, and they should also stop especially taking those Afghans which are skilled workers?
I think they are very accurate in their assessment, and you know what Excellency Hilaly was saying, that most of these people who are leaving, they are we can call them economic refugees or opportunists, those who want to get out of a poor country and go to some green pastures. Most of them, maybe there are a few who are genuinely, they were supporting Americans and they are really afraid of their lives, they are fear for their lives. Otherwise, he's right that in any third world country, if you announce that you have a free ride without visa, you can go to Western world, they would like to go. So I think what Afghan Taliban are saying, that Americans are willfully creating this chaos to show the world that people are afraid of the Afghan Taliban and they don't trust them. This is not the case. Because the people are going because of the reasons that he mentioned and I am mentioning. So I think what Afghan Taliban are sensing and whatever they are evaluating about the American intentions is very much right. They are correct in assessing that.
So, General Lodhi, do we anticipate sanctions against the probable Taliban-led setup if they don't apparently seem to meet all those demands which are put forth by, just as we talk about, the United Nations Human Rights Council yesterday had an emergency session regarding the situation in Afghanistan, and now we have seen that the World Bank has also held the aid disbursements. I mean, if such type of measures by the international organizations, especially the monetary organizations, are taken against the people of Afghanistan, so there would be a huge risk of starvation that the World Food Program has warned about.
We have to understand two things. One, that all these monetary institutions, they are under very heavy influence of the West, especially America. And secondly, even if Afghan Taliban meet all the requirements, each and every requirement what the world expects, still they will face sanctions. Not for the reason that they are abiding by the things or not doing whatever was, just because America is against Taliban regime, and they will try their best that it should fail. And this is the best available path with them that squeeze them economically and financially. On the other hand, see what World Food Program is saying, which means that America and their allies, by freezing their assets, freezing Afghan assets, and by World Bank, stopping that aid, means that they are morally not at all concerned about the deaths of Afghans with hunger or with any disease or anything. I think this will expose them very badly because on one hand there's a human catastrophe being expected, that is the people will die of hunger, and on the other hand they are freezing all their assets and they're stopping all the flow of money. So as it has happened with us, that whether we do 28 points out of the 27 which were required by FATF, still we remain in the grey list. So Afghanistan will face a similar fate. They will be sanctioned, heavily sanctioned for a very long time, but I feel that the days of sanctions are nearly over, because now parallel paths are coming up. They have enough liquidity, they have enough political clout. They will support Afghanistan, and Afghanistan will keep moving in the right direction in spite of all these sanctions.
General Lodhi and Mr. Hilaly will resume the discussion from this very point about the possibility of the sanctions heading towards the probable Taliban-led setup in Afghanistan in future. But right after a short break, for that, please stay tuned. Welcome back to Newswire Afghanistan Special. I am Jawad Tehami and I am joined by Lieutenant General retired Naeem Khalid Lodhi and Mr. Zafar Hilaly. Thank you both of you for your time. And now the World Bank has suspended its disbursements. Mr. Hilaly, what do you say if such type of measures are taken by the international monetary institutions? So it would become very hard for an already war-crippled economy like Afghanistan to meet with the economic challenges.
I think you forgot to mention the fact that $10 billion of Afghan money, which is indisputably Afghan money, was also seized by the United States, saying that they would not release it to the new Afghan government. Then immediately thereafter, a couple of days, the IMF followed, and then now the World Bank has followed. Look, I mean, these institutions are supposed to belong to the world. They're supposed to be UN institutions, but they're acting as if they are American slaves. I mean, and what business do you have to confiscate or freeze assets which are indisputably Afghan? And if you are doing so because they have violated some treaty, please say so. And if they have violated human rights, don't you think you should wait more than a day or two to give the Taliban a chance to make clear violations of human rights? Isn't it obvious what the game is? They've decided, they've made up their minds to sanction the Taliban much earlier. Now, what you're doing is, basically you're saying to the people of Afghanistan, you know what, if you let us stay in your country and kill people at will and do what we want with the likes of this chap, Karzai and Ghani, you will be able to eat. But if you don't, and we are going to seize everything you have and cut off all aid and other things, help, so you will then starve. Now, which do you prefer? Do you prefer live and eat and live, and have us on you, or starve? You know, it is remarkable how a sensible, educated people can make such decisions. Because in effect, these are the decisions which the people of Afghanistan are now faced with.
So, Mr. Hilaly, when you talk about the U.S. Wanting the Afghan people to have such type of regimes which were led by Hamid Karzai or Ashraf Ghani, the U.S. itself pointed fingers at the Afghan regimes that they had the corrupt elements over there, and the funding which has been given to the Afghan regimes over the last 2 decades had gone into the coffers of some certain elites, despite that fact.
Yes, you're right. Look, they had 19 million voters in Afghanistan, and 1 million, only 1 million voted. And we are told that they voted for the American candidate, for the American proxy, the American mercenary, whatever word you like to use, first Karzai, and then Ghani. Now, what I want to know is that who says that this amount of money, this $2 trillion that the United States spent on the war since the last 20 years, amounting to $300 million a day, was spent on Afghans? It wasn't. It was spent on American contractors. It was taken away in corruption. Go and see the directory of penthouses and property owned in Dubai by Afghans associated with these mercenary governments. They are the chief owners. You know, to think name me one hospital, name me a couple of schools. Nothing, zero, no dams, nothing. The only thing they did was they spent it on supplying equipment, money to the American forces, and of course salary. And by the way, the Afghan army had not apparently been paid 9 months of salary. So they were being asked to fight for America, which everybody knew pays salaries, which had not paid salaries for 9 months. And then they are accused of not wanting to fight and not wanting to have the will to fight. They're not mad. They can see. There's been no. What do you think the poverty rate in Afghanistan was in when the troops came in? It was 40%. It is now 60%. You know, this is a miss. Please don't think that the Americans spent anything on anybody but themselves, their contractors, and their stooges.
Okay, your point is well taken. General Lodhi, I would like to quote an excerpt from a foreign author, Peter Frankopan, who in his book, The Silk Roads, A New History of the World, says about the sanctions when the U.S. imposed those sanctions after the Gulf War on Iraqi exports. He writes, quote, with blanket restrictions on Iraqi exports and on financial transactions, the impact was devastating, especially on the poor. So that was exactly the thing that you were alluding to, and it actually causes hunger and disease. And the initial estimates, he writes, in the Lancet suggested that 500,000 children alone died from malnutrition and disease as a direct result of these policies in 5 years. Quite a startling figure he has given in his book.
Naturally, I mean, we must try by now, we should be very clear that Americans and Western allies have no love and lost for any nation, neither their women nor their children. You see what has happened in Syria, what has happened in Yemen, and now in Afghanistan, and you are talking about Iraq also. So it's everywhere. The story is the same. And every time they could have gone wrong in one place or the other place, but then if the same thing is happening again and again in numerous places, then it means that their actual objectives are very different. And some objectives I think Hilaly Saab has brought out. Probably they also want the Muslim population to diminish or to finish. Maybe this could be one of, we must evaluate that. Why it is happening to all the Muslim countries. So I think we need to sit down, review the entire thing, and especially those of our brothers and sisters who still trust a lot as far as the American, intentions are concerned, or the Western intentions are concerned, because they put a very nice cover on their intentions. But we should not be that naive that in spite of all these happenings, in spite of all that we have seen with our own eyes and heard with our own ears, even then if we don't believe that what actually is happening, what is being said and what is actually happening, we must try to discern all these things and make up our own plan, a counter plan to save ourselves from the clutches of these people. They are really cruel. Their faces have been exposed. And even now, if we keep on clinging to them and don't are not wary about their intention, that it is up to us, it means that we are going for a suicide. So I'm also alluding to some of the options which Pakistan has, and we have to make certain decisions now that which way to go and where to where to align ourselves with which countries. So all these things should be eye-openers for us, and we must try to be realistic and try to find the right path for ourselves. Otherwise, our generations will not forgive us.
So, General Lodhi, as you just mentioned, it happened back in Iraq as well. It happened in Syria, and now there is the likelihood of it happening in Afghanistan as well. So it establishes quite a pattern of America that it resorts to imposing sanctions, particularly these Muslim countries. My question to you is, could there be any sort of a check on such type of behavior by the Americans towards such countries?
They are a strong country, there's no doubt about it, and their strength is not only the military strength, political strength, and this technological prowess. The main strength which they are wielding, and we must know that is perception management. Unfortunately, half of the population of every country which you have mentioned, they fall for their ruse, and every time they fall in that trap. Because they show a different picture altogether through CNN and other BBC and other outlets. So one that we need to make our people aware, as we are doing now, and we must have more voice. We must have more media, channels, especially the language which the world understands. As you are doing, the Indus, people are doing it. So we need to do that one, and then we need to get together. Maybe collectively we can resist all this. They also try to keep us separated. People fighting with there was a time that UAE and Saudi Arabia had the best of the relations, and now they have created a wedge between them also. Whatever has happened with Qatar, there was a Gulf states organization doing very well. Then you have seen that Turkey against some Muslim countries, and so they are trying to keep us bifurcated and separated and divided. So the first thing is that we must get together under whatever umbrella, OIC or even some regional arrangements, and we should try to expose this pattern and tell our own people and try to tell our leadership that what is happening to us. Only then we will be able to resist. And some of the benign powers which have proved in the past that they are not for exploitation, we must try to get their help. So that is the only way out. Otherwise, we will be killed one by one.
Okay, Mr. Hilaly, what do you think how this pattern of the American behavior in the Committee of Nations can be exposed at first, and then there could be a check on this particular behavior?
There is absolutely no way that manipulation of perceptions will be able to do this. It is very simple. Get used to reality. As long as the Americans know that they can bomb with impunity, act with impunity, sign agreements and disavow them with impunity, and nothing and nobody can do a damn thing to make them suffer, why should they bother? I'm astonished that you think there is any any way of perception management, of software management that will bring these people who, after all, I mean, I'm sorry, we don't seem to know our history very well. Please go and study what happened to the millions and millions of Red Indians in the United States, where they are now and how they were disposed of. So the answer to you is as follows. Ask yourself one question. Why did they permit 90 miles offshore from the United States a communist island, an impoverished communist island, to survive? When I say impoverished, it is still, Cuba is still better off than many developing countries, but not a very rich country. Why was it allowed to survive? Because they knew that if they ventured to bomb Cuba, they would be bombed themselves. So unless and until you can visit direct damage on American interests and on America itself, you will have to put up with this. And the only countries that can do that don't have to bother. And if there is any doubt, look at the North Korea. It should have been. We were sanctioned by Pressler in the 90s for aspiring for a bomb. North Korea has it and the missiles. Why isn't it being bombed?
Yeah, Mr. Hilaly, but in the recent past, we see that there were allegations on Iranians that they were up to making the nuclear weapons, and that there were certain targeted strikes on the important personnel from Iran by the US, and then we saw Iran retaliating in equal terms, but still the sanctions on Iran's economy haunt them till today.
Iran has not been. There's been no retaliation by Iran. Iran can't retaliate because if Iran retaliates, there won't be an Iran. Isn't there what Trump sent in a message to the mullahs ruling Iran? Exactly that. So please don't think that the Iranians are retaliating. What are they doing? They're firing one rocket at some ship. Ask the Israelis, when they decide the time has come that Iran has reached enrichment stage and will be in possession of deliverable nuclear weapons, they won't even wait for the United States. They will attack directly. Who on earth keeps telling you that the United States does nothing, even if Iran does what it wants? Iran has done nothing, can do nothing, and if it can, won't, unless it is absolutely certain that the damage it can cause the U.S. and its enemy, Israel, in the Middle East is such that it threatens their existence.
Okay, General Lodhi, what do you say about it when Mr. Hilaly says that it's not about managing the perception, rather there should be a direct retaliation to what the U.S. has been up to in history and is now even as of today?
You know, once I was talking about perceptions, I was talking about, educating our own people, putting the thinking of our own people on straight line. But I agree with him that unless you have if not matching, but at least a menacing power, which can deter Americans from going all out to bomb you or to come, act against you, till then the world will keep suffering. Only we have seen that so far only China has the ability to stand against them. Russia is also doing that. All other countries are nearly acquiescing to whatever they are telling them to do. Very few of them are, standing up against them. Yes, one is having the wherewithal, and second, I think, which Excellency Hilaly indicated it very well, that is your will. Even if you have a small thing, but if you have the will to use it and cause damage, if not directly to America, to American interest, even then that will act as a deterrent. And I think very aptly the example of North Korea was given. So I would go along with this, that having nuclear weapons or having missiles is one thing, but having the heart and mind and the political will to actually employ them is altogether another thing. You know, people keep saying that these are political weapons, they are not to be used, and they are not to be even discussed. So that way you actually dilute the efficacy of these, powers which any country has. So I agree with it that for weaklings, there is no place in this world. This world has been constructed for tigers and for eagles. There's no place for pigeons and rabbits. So we need to know that as long as you behave like a pigeon, you behave like a dove, the eagles will keep on pouncing at you.
So, General Lodhi, coming back to the point, when the Afghan people need economic prosperity and development, and since the World Bank, following the suit of the United States and IMF, has held the aid disbursements, at the same time another UN agency has warned of a risk of starvation for the Afghans, and it has said that it needs $200 million by the end of the year to continue its operations in Afghanistan. Where do you think this amount will come from? Do you think the regional countries, for example, China, Pakistan, as well as Russia, would come to the fore in this hour of need for the Afghan people?
I think it is in the interest of regional countries and the neighboring countries to do that, because if you have a sore within your area, it impacts everyone around. If disease spreads, it will also come to Pakistan. It will also go to China and Russia. So I think it is very much in the good interest of China, Russia, Iran, Pakistan, Central Asian countries, anyone who can afford it, to make sure that there's no starvation, there's no famine, there's no disease in Afghanistan. And I am quite hopeful it will happen that way. And that is why I say that the ugly face of the West and the Americans will get further exposed if they really keep doing what they are doing. In my own opinion, it will be very difficult for them to keep to Afghanistan open for Chinese and Russians only. They would like to come here and contest economically and politically. So the moment inclusive government is formed, about 10, 12 countries, including Russia, China, Iran, Central Asian countries, maybe Pakistan, they acknowledge them. The others will follow suit after some time. So these are initial gestures, initial pressures which they are putting, for their short-term things. But in the long term, I think they will come and do that. But as I said, because they are against the Afghan regime, they will try their best to upset them initially. They will try their best to do everything to derail the entire process. But once they see that it is on course, it cannot be derailed, then probably they'll come and join the wagon.
So, Mr. Hilaly, what do you say? Do you think it becomes a responsibility? In fact, it happens to be a test for the regional countries like China, Russia, Pakistan, Iran to help the Afghan people, when on the other hand we see the Western countries and the UN agencies stopping all those aid disbursements for Afghanistan?
I don't think we have an option. Please don't think we have an option. Otherwise, they'll be at the fences rattling the wire, and we will have to let them in. It is inconceivable that people die of starvation at our borders, and we do nothing. I don't think China and Russia also, whatever they may think and say at the moment about the dangers of letting in refugees from Afghanistan. I mean, this Putin saying that they may be terrorists in disguise. I mean, he really spoke like a former KGB official and not as the head of a huge country. But anyway, that's sad, but what to do? We have to feed them as much as we can. We have to share with them what we have, because whether you like it or not, you'll have to do that. It is in your own interest to do that. I mean, don't think that this is charity. This is necessity. And I'm sure people will respond generously, because they are not into starving people because they are anti-American or because they, they don't want their homeland to be occupied by the foreigners. Absolutely not.
Mr. Hilaly, one last question. Unfortunately, we are short of time. Iran has resumed oil supplies to Afghanistan. Do you think at this very point in time it can provide some sort of respite for the war-crippled economy?
Yes, I think they should not only resume oil shipments, they should give it at the lowest cost possible, if possible even free. I mean, look, Afghanistan has nothing. The last 10 billion it had has been frozen. Look at this government. The first thing it did was to restore a bank man. The bank previous chap having run away with a lot of funds. So that people can access their bank accounts. Of course. We have no option but to think of Afghanistan as a part of the problems we face. That is how to approach it.
So, General Lodhi, what do you say? Do you think this resumption of oil supplies by Iran to Afghanistan will provide some sort of respite?
Definitely, and I think it's a very good gesture and a very timely one. And Pakistan should also see that what all we can do. Maybe we can send some food items or something. We don't need to wait for the inclusive government, which can come in, in the course of time. We should be worried about Afghan people, our brothers, not necessarily the government. So I would say that all the neighboring countries must chip in and make sure that Afghanistan remains healthy, at least at the bare minimum level. Otherwise, we will all suffer.
Lieutenant General retired Naeem Khalid, Lodhi defense analyst, thank you very much for your time at Newswire. And Mr. Zafar Hilaly, former ambassador, thank you for your time at Newswire. Well, and with this, we come to the end of today's program, and with more in-depth analyses, we'll be back tomorrow. For that, stay tuned.